difference between the Sharia and the Islamic jurisprudence? That's not the one that was
Okay, the difference, okay, yeah, and hello, online students, we're just starting, we did a little quiz. The difference between Islamic jurisprudence and Sharia, it's not really so much a difference as Islamic jurisprudence falls within the umbrella of Sharia law. Sharia law is the main word. It's kind of like saying what's the difference between the Mosaic law and the rites of purification in the Old Testament. Well, they all fall under the Mosaic law. Okay, so these things we talked about under and by the way, you know what jurisprudence means, right? I mean, just even in our legal system, we use that word all the time. What is jurisprudence? I guess I kind of took that for granted. How would you define jurisprudence? It's basically how you manage the law. How do you steward the law? Okay, and our word jury actually comes from that because the jury is a part of that process. So jurisprudence is the process of doing law, basically. Now, I'm not a lawyer, so there's probably a better definition out there. But just think of it as how you do law, how you manage, steward the law. And so, we talked about fiqh, which different ways that you can determine how to observe the law. Consensus. Now, which of the two groups prefers consensus between the Sunnis and the Shiites? When it comes to the overall final authority? Yeah, right. The Sunnis don't believe in a particular descendant, heir of Muhammad like the Shiites would. Okay? Another way of determining how to interpret or apply a law is through analogical reasoning, and that isn't as tough as it sounds. Basically, what that is if there's not a specific law in the Sharia law to deal with a particular case, then you try to find some sort of analogous examples, and usually that's something that happened in the past, what you call precedent. Is there a precedent, something that was dealt with in the past that's similar to what we're dealing with here that we could use as an analogy to guide our decision? That makes sense. We do that in our law. All this stuff we're reading here is stuff that we practice in our legal system as well. And in the Old Testament, you'll find that. You'll find that certain laws were made because of a particular situation, and those become precedents for later laws. Okay? Can you give me an example in the Bible of a law that came about because of a certain situation that became a precedent? Something happens in Israel's history, a law is established to deal with that, and that becomes standard. Yeah. Esther. Yeah, although that was that was dealing with a particular situation, but I don't know that it became a precedent, overall for Israel's legal system. I'm thinking of something a little farther back in the law. For example, do you remember when the daughters of Zelophehad came to Moses and said, hey, there are laws about inheritance, right? Maintaining land within the tribes, but that's always handled through the son. We hear, I don't remember how many there were, but these daughters had no brothers. Dad died, now what? And so Moses consults the Lord, and the Lord says to Moses, they're right. Something needs to be done. So they made a new stipulation that if there were no, sons, that the daughters could become, an heir. And so that became standard practice. There's a word for that in the legal world. I mean, I'm using the word precedence, but there's another word for that type of law, and I'm sorry I don't remember off the top of my head what it is. It's not a word I use every day. But anyway, that's the idea of analogical reasoning. Now, what if there is no precedent? What if there's no case that happened in the past that can be used to guide a present decision? This is where you come up with the next one, ijtihad, or however you say that. It's actually connected etymologically to the word jihad. And the reason for that is because it involves an independent struggle within to reason through something and decide what is the best idea, most in keeping with Sharia law and intention. So I have nothing to go on in the past. It's a brand new situation, never seen anything like this before. So now you have more independence in reasoning through this, struggling to come up with a decision. Again, that happens in our legal system as well, although it's rare to find a case that has nothing previous to go on. Okay, now the impact of this fiqh, which is the jurisprudence, it's more common in the past. In other words, in the past, and I didn't fully understand this. In fact, it seemed a little bit odd that it would be the way that he says that it is. Let me read. Let me give you the rest of this. It's less common now. Working through things this way was more common in the past, but now a new way of dealing with Sharia laws that are not specified is preferred, and that's called the taqlid. And the taqlid, well, no, sorry, I thought that. Let me just read this to you. Maybe you can give me your opinion on this. Go back to taqlid here. Okay. In the early centuries of Islam, these kinds up here, A, B, and C, these kinds of interpretive strategies were common. Yet as time went on, legal rulings and procedures gradually solidified, and Muslims tended more and more to imitate and accept on authority what their predecessors had to struggle to achieve. So what he's saying is, in the early days of Islam, there was a lot of this kind of activity going on, but as time went on, people began to look less to these options and more just to what others who had been down that road said. Okay? This tendency to follow the past decisions and interpretations of Islamic jurisprudence is called taqlid, which means to imitate or follow someone. Taqlid means that one follows or imitates the decisions of a mujtahid in religious laws without engaging in original ijtihad. Okay? As such, taqlid is contrasted with independent reasoning. I guess I just kind of thought that independent reasoning would become more and more common, but apparently it's not. As more and more decisions were made, more and more cases were established, people did exercise these less and less and began just to accept the decisions that others made in the past. Okay, yeah, Emma?
This is not attractive, but what is the...
Pardon?
The Muhammad al-Hadith, what is the Hadith? What does that mean?
I'm sorry, which word are you looking at?
In the circle, the right...
Oh, the Hadith.
Yeah.
Okay, the Hadith is a collection of historical Islamic volumes that give us what they say are the words of Muhammad, but a bunch of other things as well. That's actually the source that Nabiu went to when he started questioning the claims about Muhammad. Okay, so it's a collection of Islamic history books. Yep. Okay. Sorry, I didn't know which word you were pointing to up there. All righty. Just before we get to worship and practice, let me go back and do something here just to fill in. We talked about the Hajj. In fact, we are going to mention that again. Let me see. Maybe I can actually just wait and deal with that. Yeah, okay. Actually, it'll come up later on. We'll just move into this area. Okay, 5 pillars of worship. Now, the book makes it a point to say we should not refer to the 5 pillars of Islam. Okay, because these pillars are dealing specifically with what pertains to worship. So it's not, just broadly Islam. Does that make sense? Can any of you name any of these pillars? I didn't give them to you in the notes, right? Yeah. Okay. Yep. Okay, good start. You said giving of alms, the Hajj, the pilgrimage to Mecca, and you said prayer and fasting. There are 2 more. Anybody fill those in? What's the very first one, the most foundational tenet of, the Shahada, right, that claims, there's one God, Allah, and his prophet is Muhammad. And then there's one more. Well, here we go. There's the Shahada, the most important one. And again, according to Islamic tradition, if you approach, an Islamic authority, an imam or something like that, and you say, I want to convert to Islam, and you repeat the Shahada, there's one God, Allah, and Muhammad is his prophet, and you mean that in your heart, you say it sincerely, you have converted to Islam. Now, just as sure as I'm standing here, you're going to go out and talk to some Muslim, they'll say, well, it's not quite that way or that easy. But that's essentially what I've read over and over again about what it means to become. It's kind of like a Christian saying, if you truly believe and you confess Jesus and believe in your heart, the gospel message, you are saved. Okay? Pardon me. There is no God but Allah, and Muhammad is his prophet. Yeah, there you go. It must be said in Arabic before two witnesses, qualification there, okay? Say, what if I don't know Arabic? There's not a whole lot there to learn Arabic. You can. Now, again, is there going to be a group out there that says, no, you can actually say it in English as long as you mean it? I'm sure there is. Just sure there is, okay? And then there's the salat, which is the prayers, and there is the 5 daily prayers that a Muslim would make, and what will they always have with them to facilitate their prayer time? Some might use a shawl, a covering of some sort. A what? Well, okay, yes. I mean, and I don't know how strict they are in that in all the 5 daily prayers. But there are ceremonial washings that are connected with prayer. What do they carry around? Yeah. Yeah, mat, a little mat, because in order to maintain purity keep yourself pure from the ground. Your body is, and the ceremonial washing kind of go along with that. I don't know in the workaday world here, like in the States, if somebody, because companies are actually expected to allow Muslims to have that prayer time if they're an employee. Some of them will say that becomes your break time or whatever. There are different ways that companies deal with that. But there's usually a little prayer mat. And of course, you always prostrate yourself facing Mecca. And then there's another kind of prayer that is known as petitionary prayer, where you can beg Allah for forgiveness or intercede for someone. Okay? That would be in addition to, beyond the 5 daily prayers. Then letter C is the Sawm, which is a fasting. Now, it's obligatory during the month of Ramadan, during the daylight hours. Notice the daylight hours. So once you fulfill that, then at night, there's feasting and things like that. So it's not even something that lasts for an entire 24-hour period. Okay. And then those fastings are broken by an Islamic festival that brings it to a conclusion. And then there's feasting and all that. I go too fast? All right. Next one, zakat. And zakat is the almsgiving. Now, what percentage is a Muslim expected to contribute as alms? Think of it as kind of corresponding to the idea of offerings, okay, that we see in the scriptures. Normally, the suggestion for offerings is what in our movement? 10%, and I don't personally believe that's a mandate in the New Testament, but I think that in the early church, being Jewish, probably followed that, and even in the Old Testament, there are different percentages for different things, so it's not a totally black and white issue. But in Islam, it's different. Anybody have a guess as to what percentage they would normally give? There it is. 2.5% according to the Hadith. Now, that's not stipulated in the Quran. See, there's a teaching, Emma, that comes out of their history book, but it wouldn't be an inspired. I don't know if that comes from the words of Muhammad. If this was something that Muhammad is said to have spoken, then they would probably consider it binding, even though it's in the Hadith. Okay. It's interesting. It's considered a purification of wealth. That is interesting. Anyway, then the Hajj is the pilgrimage. And here what I'd like to do is just, the book gives you, and I'm sure you read it, but you guys got so much to read. It actually stipulates what happens on each day. So I just want to go back and kind of review that quickly for you. Day one is when all pilgrims circumambulate. Now, there's a good word for tired college students on the last day before break. Well, what does it mean to circumambulate? Why couldn't he have said it differently? What's he mean by that? Well, go around, ambulate means you're moving. So I just say go around. I don't know. What does an ambulance do? It goes, okay? All pilgrims, in fact, he says circumambulate. Well, the reason is because the word tawaf, which is the word they use for that, apparently literally means that, because he clarifies, that is walk around the Kaaba 7 times. That's that cube. In fact, that's what the word Kaaba means. It means cube. Okay? They walk around it 7 times, with many attempting to kiss, touch, or get near the black stone. We talked about that black stone in the corner. You can find pictures of that online. The stone that the Muslims believe fell from heaven during the time of Adam and Eve, which is now framed in silver and attached to the side of the Kaaba. Tradition says that originally the black stone was white, but its power to absorb sin has turned it black. Now, I misread that originally. I thought that the blackness of the cube itself was a result of absorption of sin, but I stand corrected here. It's the black stone that they say was white when it first fell from heaven, but because of absorbing sin, I mean, again, see the imitation of Satan. Christ, who knew no sin, became sin for us. He absorbed our sin so that we might be made the righteousness of God in him. Yeah, interesting. Okay, and then many believe that the Kaaba, the cube, which was originally constructed by the prophet Adam, notice they call him a prophet, then rebuilt by Abraham and Ishmael. Okay, either rebuilt or restored or whatever, depending on who you talk to. All right, so anyway, there's more to it. I'll just day 2, after daybreak, the pilgrims walk through Mina in order to reach Mount Arafat, where pilgrims pray fervently, employing the phrase, and it's a phrase that means "at your service, O God, at your service." The importance of spending time at Arafat is exemplified by the fact that if pilgrims do not spend the afternoon on Arafat, their pilgrimage is unacceptable. So it's a very big part of their day. That's where they express their disposition to serve Allah. Very, very important. And I underline this, for many Muslims, the day of Arafat is the highlight of their pilgrimage, in part because on this day they seek forgiveness from God in the place where they believe Prophet Muhammad delivered his final sermon, so that location has spiritual potency for the faithful. At sunset, the pilgrims leave Arafat and travel to a plain where they spend the night praying and gathering small stones for the next day's rituals. Okay, so every year they're asking forgiveness from Allah. Now, is there something in the Bible that corresponds to that? An annual getting things right. Yeah, the Day of Atonement, Yom Kippur, right? When the high priest would enter in and make provision through sacrifices so that Israel can maintain fellowship with God. I mean, just look at the hijacking of Satan, of the truth of God to create a lie. Yeah. Okay, then the last day, the third day, before sunrise, they travel to Mina, also known as the tent city, and approach the large pillars representing the temptations of Satan. Here we go again. okay, who, according to Muslim tradition, tried to prevent Abraham from following God's command to sacrifice his son Ishmael. Wait a minute, no, the Bible says Isaac. Oh yes, it does, but you have to understand that through many translations, error has crept in. The original text would not have said Isaac, but Ishmael, right? We stand corrected, right, in the eyes of Muslims. By stoning the pillars of Satan, pilgrims reject Satan's temptation in their own lives. By the third day, pilgrims have traveled, mingled, prayed, and sought God together. Many are tired. Anybody amen that? Many are tired, but they have achieved what will be one of the highlights of their religious lives. On this day, the last day of the Hajj, pilgrims joined by Muslims around the world will celebrate Eid al-Adha, which means the festival of sacrifice, the second of two major Muslim festivals commemorating the trials and victory of Abraham as well as the goodness of God that provided a ram for Abraham to sacrifice rather than his own son, demonstrating that a Muslim is committed to sacrificing anything to God. Okay? It's not a picture in any way of a final, all-consuming sacrifice. See? So, interesting. So that's, in essence, the three days of the Hajj and what it amounts to. Yeah, interesting. Anybody here know of anybody that's ever done a Hajj? A Muslim person? I mean, you were in Togo there. You mentioned your trip. I'm sure there'd be quite a few Muslims there. I don't know if any of them would have done a Hajj.
Yeah, there was typically almost every corner of like northern.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
None of my friends, I don't think, have done.
Okay. Yeah, interesting. All right. So it's to Mecca. Now this says 5 days of ritual activities. These are the three main ones. Apparently on other days there's a variety of things, scheduled that I don't know about. Yeah, Cody?
Just a random question. Where did the word Muslim come from Islam?
Okay. And I looked back in the notes. Did I not have a place where we actually talked about the meaning of the word itself? The word Islam means what? Does anybody know? I thought we mentioned this, but yeah. It means submission, exactly. And so, excuse me, Muhammad submits to the recitations of the angel Gabriel, submits to Allah as a prophet of Allah, and so Islam means, and a Muslim, the word Muslim is connected to that. It means one who submits. Yep. When I was growing up, when we first started hearing about this movement, it looked like this. Everybody talked about the Muslims, okay? And then in the late 70s, early 80s, I'm guessing, we started seeing that word. And of course, it's just, they're both English attempts to transliterate the Arabic word. So, yeah. About 3 million people do this annually. And it doesn't have to be, okay, what's the famous month in the Islamic calendar? Most important month? Or the most important, yeah, the month of, maybe I'm wrong calling it the month when they practice the greatest pilgrimage of all. It's during Ramadan, okay? That would be when you'd have the most there at one time. Can you be excused from Hajj? How? On what basis? Death. Well, yeah, that's true. But if you're alive.
Isn't it if you're not financially able to, if you're not
Yep. If you have financial or health issues that make it impossible to go, you can be excused, okay, from going. So it's not like you go or you can never be saved or whatever. All right. Now, just a second, let me go back here one second. Okay. Yeah.
Sorry, I noticed you mentioned like the
Oh, yes, yes, they do. Now, I don't know much about their theology of Satan and demons, but they definitely believe in that, yes. Yes. Jihad, you all have heard that word, and it means to strive, fight, exert, struggle. Any one of those words will do, but there are two very different ways to apply this, right? So what are they? If you're a Sunni, yeah, go ahead, Cody.
Either internally or externally.
All right. Which group would be the most likely to emphasize the internal struggle? Yeah. So they would view that kind of the way Christian views what? Yeah. We struggle against sin. We struggle to become like Christ. Obviously, the background of that's completely different, but Christians do acknowledge a struggle that they engage every day. Right? Struggle to stay awake in class, struggle to pay your bill, struggle to become like Christ. And so the greater jihad, okay, is the jihad that represents the majority of Muslims, most Sunnis. And I don't think it's limited necessarily to Sunnis or Shiites, okay, but in general, the Sunnis will emphasize much more the internal struggle. I think I mentioned to you that we took a trip to London. Actually, we visited the Galbraiths in England, and one of their colleagues was living in a city about 20 miles from London, and that city is 95% Muslim. You don't even recognize that you're in England when you're in that town. But they're all Sunnis, and they're very gracious. They fixed one of the guys there who was a leader in their community, definitely not a believer, fixed a delicious, very spicy hot meal. I don't know if you don't like spicy hot, but my tongue was on fire, man. But it was good. It was really good. And he took about a half an hour and kind of shared, what he thought. And part of what he did was to try to remind us that, Muslims aren't all terrorists. that Western idea, it's been inculcated in us. And he, and all these guys, all these Muslims in that community, would have viewed the jihad as an internal struggle. Very, very, very loving people. We never once felt like, I wonder if somebody's creeping up on us from behind. Never that. Okay? And then, according to this greater jihad, submitting to Allah and resisting temptation are really what constitute that struggle. And guess what? Submitting to Jesus Christ by the Spirit, resisting temptation. I am tempted to correct that word, and I'm going to give in to the temptation. Excuse me. Let's see. Let me get the right word here. You guys didn't even, or you're just being nice to me. You didn't say anything. Cody, you saw it, didn't you? I know you. Temptation. Now, the lesser jihad. That is called lesser, not because it's less intense, but because fewer people hold to this view. It's the physical or external struggle, okay, which, and Cody used the word external, usually takes a military form of some sort, not always, but in fact, some Muslims believe that this actually should become the sixth pillar. In addition to the five we just looked at, let's add jihad as well, okay? Now here's a question for you. If you read the Quran and you interpret it literally, just like you would interpret the Bible, which form of jihad would you adopt? You read through the Quran, you read about jihad, you're reading it literally, interpreting it literally, which form of jihad would you come up with? Pardon? Yeah. Yep, the jihad that is described in the Quran, and I don't know about the Hadith, probably there too, is really depicting more of the militant, physical, political jihad that results in the domination of Allah over all the earth.
Because the people who believe in the lesser are pretty judgmental of the people who don't, right? Because they're like, oh, we're sticking to the actual. Right?
Yes. Let me just take a peek here. Now, they don't give us a quote from, So And again, you see the correspondence with Christianity. Christianity believes that there's going to be an ultimate, I wouldn't use the word jihad, but an ultimate battle when Christ comes back, the Battle of Armageddon, campaign that's been ensuing since the middle of the tribulation. It culminates in the second coming. It's a battle. And Christ comes back and destroys his enemies. Okay? But that is not the command now. You know, notwithstanding the Crusaders who believed that might makes right, you know, the sword and the cross together, right? And so when you use the word jihadist, never use the word jihadist if you're not referring to a terrorist, okay? Because those who adopt the greater jihad will never use the word jihadist to refer to what they're doing, okay? So you don't have to ask somebody, what kind of a jihadist are you? Okay, because it's always referring to external groups, extremist groups. Okay. Purification. All right. Interesting. Do the other religions that we've studied have any sort of provision for purification of a person? Obviously, Christianity does. Purification rites in the Old Testament. The blood of Jesus Christ, his son, purifies us from all sin. Obviously, Islam does. What about other religions?
Like Buddhism, you like purify yourself from everything, like the idea of enlightenment.
Okay, yeah, even like dissociation from desires and all that is a form of purification. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah. 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 What about animism? Are there any kinds of purification rites in animistic? Yeah, there are lots of things you can do to purify yourself. Animism is all over the map. It's hard to pin down. Yeah. Cut the face of a newborn? Interesting. Ah, okay. So it's an identity right then, kind of, huh? So the cuts will be different. Right. Interesting. I don't know if that's so much of a purification thing or is it just a tribal identity? Uh-huh. Yeah. Interesting. It's interesting. It makes sense. Doesn't it make sense that every major religion would observe some sort of purification just because every religion deals with evil, sin in some way, right? How to resolve it. And so Buddha resolved it by saying, you know, we have to completely lose the desire to be attached to all that. Yeah. But the only belief system that I know of that teaches a once and for all purification of our sins forever is in the unique teaching of the sacrifice of Christ. Once for all. Hebrews makes such a big deal of that. Once for all, once for all. Yep. Okay. Where'd all that come from? I guess it came up. Okay, purification takes several forms. Fitra refers to human nature. Now notice the teaching here. This is so important. Man, according to Islam, was created with an innate nature to submit to Allah. And we believe that man was conceived in sin, and what other language does the Bible use to describe man's natural state when he's born? Huh? Okay. Can you think of a passage that tells us that? Yeah. Ephesians 2. He has made alive who were dead in trespass by nature, right? Children of wrath. Yeah.
Well, like the first point, choosing to submit to Allah, like we were naturally.
Yep. Right. Yeah.
But I think I get what they're getting at, 'cause I think the idea of the sense of the divine, where all people kind of like understand that there is a God, concept,
Yeah, yeah. Yeah, the basic difference is where sin comes from, where the desire, the habit of sinning comes from. We believe it's part of man's fallen nature. We are all going to sin. We are all going to manifest the fruit of our nature. Whereas here, yeah, people sin, but it's not because it's innate within you. It's because parents and society have messed up. And by the way, that sure sounds a lot like another religion that we studied that is more of a philosophy than a religion. Which one was that? Confucianism. Confucianism is a form of humanism which says man is basically good. The problem is he's corrupted by society. That is very, very, very reminiscent of what we see here. Yeah.
No idea who started it.
Who started what?
The first evil. Like, if you're naturally good, you can't. The first person didn't have society or people to corrupt it.
Yeah.
Who started the corruption?
I don't know. I'm sure there are theories out there. Maybe it was Satan. You know. Yeah, I don't know. Yeah, that's a good question. Aren't you thankful that the Bible, even though we don't understand everything, that the Bible has made certain things, essential things clear to us? Just what a blessing. So anyway, it's your parents' fault. So when you go home for Christmas break, you know, or Thanksgiving break, just make sure you remind them of that. B, just kidding. Two major rituals of purification are major and minor ablution, and they involve certain activities or ceremonies. Major ablution, when you're going to a festival or a particular ceremony, you know, a formal ceremony, you will do formal washings. Whereas the minor ablution is like before you eat, or you said after sexual intercourse, or things like that. The typical purification that you would do on more of a daily basis, connected to daily life. So these are connected to major religious events. These more to daily life. Okay. And yeah.
Can you define that word ablution?
Yeah, actually, I think it's connected to the word ablation, which normally involved a pouring. An ablation was usually a pouring of some sort. So ablution is the pouring of water on the hands. Even if we do the Passover Seder next semester, which we're planning to do for GRC, usually somebody demonstrates that by you wash the hands. Sometimes you go up to a certain point. And remember the Jewish religion, depending on which part of Judaism you're following, you go up a certain amount of inches or a certain section of your arm, and you have to wash that. So yeah, ablation has to do with a pouring of something. Yeah. Let's save modern movements for next time. We're actually slightly ahead. I don't remember ever in teaching this course that we did that. Not sure what happened, but I'll let you guys go here. Anybody done already for the rest of the day? This is your last class? You're done. You're done. Cody? You're done. All right.